Now,
It
can
shouldn't
they,
surprise anyone.
but like,
Yeah.
can they actually be in a relationship? That's the thing. Like, can they be
Mm,
non-celibate or do they have
yeah.
to hide that part of themselves?
That's an interesting thing about the priestly vow of celibacy. Celibacy isn't about denying your sexuality. It's about channeling your sexual energy into a different life. Um, I personally think if you feel drawn to live in community, like in a monastic community, that's where celibacy really evolved as part of life as a priest or life as a brother or life as a sister in those monastic communities. And it was a different way of channeling your natural biological sexual energy.
Welcome to a new episode of the Gay and Lesbian Review. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Thanks for joining us here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. If you don't know, you can get all of our episodes ad-free on Patreon, patreon.com/ Ivory Tower Boiler Room. All of Mary's True Crime episodes ad free, video episodes ad free from the ITBR interviews. Also, follow us on Instagram, please. Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I like to put a lot of exciting arts and culture clips from the podcast, you know, TV shows, films that we've discussed. TikTok is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Long story. The Ivory Tower Boiler Room one got taken off by TikTok because it was too salacious and scandalous, in my opinion. But I might be just having an Oscar Wilde complex there, thinking, that I was causing such a sensation on TikTok. So please rate us on Apple. It really, really helps. Review us. If you're on Spotify, you can rate us there too. YouTube, please follow our YouTube channel. Please like the video, share it with your friends, your community. The only way that I can keep giving you all free, exciting podcast episodes is because of the reach of the podcast. So, rating us, reviewing us, it really, really does help. Also, shout out to Sean, our intern, who, if you see the cover art, you see the edits of the podcast, that's all Sean. So, amazing work by Sean. So, I hope you all enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm really just eager and ready to dig into this topic about religiosity, spirituality, how queerness intersects with these ideas, which, specifically with religion, has a lot of a vexed history, depending on what religion we're talking about. So, my guest here is writer Bill Hulseman, who is a ritual designer, and I'm definitely going to ask him about that, and wedding officiant. That I know because I'm about to get married next year to my fiance. So, we're looking into an officiant. You're not in Jersey though, but that's okay. We'll find someone. He's was previously a teacher, campus minister, program director, and middle school principal for independent schools. He holds a BA in religious studies from Fairfield University, which I want to say is in Connecticut.
Correct.
Okay. An MTS in the comparative study of religion from Harvard Divinity School, and an EDM in education leadership from the Klingenstein Center at Teachers College, Columbia University. He lives in Seattle with his husband Jonathan, and he's here to talk all thematic ideas in his new book called Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass: Reflections on Life, Identity, and Moving Forward. And it's here in this beautiful aesthetic designed book. So, welcome to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, Bill.
Thank you.
So, I have to ask first, I feel like you have such an interesting education background. And, like, when you went in for your undergraduate studies, like, did you think already that you were probably going to enter into like grad work with theology or education, or is that kind of something that just started to interest you in your undergrad studies?
Oh no, I had no plan. I
Okay.
had no plan. When I was a kid, in grade school and in high school, I went to Catholic schools. I went to a Jesuit high school. Religion was always my favorite class because it was the one class that was truly interdisciplinary. It was a
Mm.
little bit of history, a little bit of aesthetics, a little bit of personal reflection and ethical discernment, a little bit of anthropology. So I always liked that swirl. It was a truly interdisciplinary class when everything else was really segmented in those days. Um, when I got to college, I just defaulted as a religious studies major. It would default declare like, well, I don't know, that's my favorite class. I'm sure I'll change it, no problem. And
Mhm.
instead of changing my major, I just kept diving deeper and deeper into it because once I got into studying theology and more sophisticated histories of Catholicism and Judaism, I started diving really deep into Judaism in undergrad. I never wanted to leave it. I didn't know what that was going to deliver me to. I didn't know if there was a career that could come out of that.
Mhm.
I just loved it. It was fascinating for me. So when I was maybe a junior in college is when I started to think about following academia. I think I started to envision myself doing a PhD and going the teaching in college and writing and researching
Mm.
and I know I was inspired by my professors. I know I just
Mm.
wanted to follow in their footsteps. And I shifted. I started my master's program at Divinity School, really thinking I was going to dive deep into historical theology, systematic theology. And about halfway through my first semester, I was so bored. Like I couldn't believe, like I got all the way through college. I got into Harvard and now I'm bored to tears. And I had this great conversation with my advisor at the time, whining about, oh, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe yeah, this is not the program I expected. And she said, well, tell me about this one class. I was taking three classes in systematics and I was taking one comparative studies course that was like my fun class. Like it was
Mm.
icon or idol, attitudes toward the sacred image.
Mm.
So it was a really, really interesting course looking at how aesthetics is treated in different religious and cultural contexts, and I was talking about how I had so much fun in that class, and she stopped me and said, you are allowed to have fun.
Mhm.
I was like, oh my God, nobody ever told me to have fun at school before. So that totally shifted my thinking, and I shifted into comparative studies because that's
Mm.
really where something new was lit, a new fire was lit that I wanted to stoke. And so I took a little bit more time with the master's program because I needed to kind of go back and get a better grounding in comparative studies and world religions and after a couple of semesters, I realized that I was so focused on ritual. Like ritual was the thing that I was most fascinated with, and how we use ritual to create culture, how we use ritual to shape relationships, to build communities, and starting to see, how that happens in religious, non-religious, different cultural contexts. Um, and I really thought I was going to do a PhD until I went to an info session about the PhD programs, and I can still remember Francis Schussler Fiorenza, who just died. This legendary academic theologian at Harvard Divinity School. And I remember he was on the committee, and he was there to answer questions about the PhD programs. And somebody asked a question about how long does it take to finish a PhD in religious studies, and he said, yeah, right now it takes about 8.5 years. And there was like a oh,
Mm.
oh God throughout the room. You could see every one of us like, well, maybe I don't need a PhD.
Mhm.
It's
Well,
just
I'm
a
glad to hear
long
that because it
haul.
took me
Yeah.
9 years for my PhD, so I guess I was in the ballpark.
Oh,
But
God bless you. Yeah. Yeah, so
yeah.
that was the first time that I thought, okay, I got to rethink this. Like maybe I need to have an income for a year or two before I go.
Mhm.
And I started teaching, and I worked as a campus minister at this little Catholic girls' school, and I taught
Uh,
world religions, and it was like the perfect intersection of my intellectual interests, my academic preparation, and also my personal background and my personal spiritual engagement, my personal relationship with the Catholic Church, and
mhm.
understanding of theology. So I landed in the right spot, totally thinking I was going to do that for a couple of years and then go back for a PhD, and I never did because I just loved teaching. I loved school life so much. So it was a total redirect. You asked it like, was that my plan to go that route? No, it wasn't. Everything was just an opportunity that fell in front of me, and I got really deeply engaged in it. After teaching for 8 years, I was, building as a program leader. My bosses were really good about cultivating my own kind of leadership skills, and they encouraged me to go to the Klingenstein program to pursue leadership in independent schools, and that's
Mm.
that's really where I saw my path until I burned out, and then
Oh.
and then once again I had the opportunity to figure out what was going to be next and recreate myself, and that's how I got here today.
Yeah, and somehow you went from being an East Coast person to being a West Coast person. So,
Well, let me be clear. I am at heart always a Chicago boy. Like I am always a Midwestern
oh,
soul. So,
oh, that's where
and
you're from,
oh
is
yeah, yeah, I
Chicago.
grew up in the Chicago area, and my mom was a Chicago girl, so I felt very connected to Chicago. I still talk about it like, it's the greatest place ever. I have never lived there as an adult. But
Mm.
I was in Boston for 11 years. I was in New York for a year and a half, and DC for 5 years before I came to the West Coast. So I've always felt a little bit like a foreigner on the coasts.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I'm a tried and true New Jerseyan, and you like really can't take that identity away. But
No, you cannot. No.
um, as I like drink from my Eagles, I'm from South Jersey, so now I live right outside New York City, but that like Philly spirit will always be there. So something, of course, I don't know if you probably anticipate me asking this after you talking about, being like a campus minister. I mean, hearing even about your Jesuit education. A question I just have is, being in the gay community, how do you like, because it's something I've had to think about being raised Catholic, and then I'm like a very lapsed Catholic now, and, you know, more on the agnostic slash looking into my family's Jewish ancestry. And I also like went into an interest in Judaism, but, I'm still like just exploring how religion, what it means to me in my day to day life. But like, I'm definitely very into spiritualism, but yeah, like I said, more on the agnostic side. I think that everyone listening is probably thinking, okay, well, Bill, like, how open did you feel like when you were a campus minister? Like, I just think about, can you be like openly gay and in that role? Like, I just know there's some religious institutions where like you're if people do know that you are gay, it's like you're not supposed to talk about it or even like there's a real sense of being closeted.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
or you are closeted. So, I mean, if you can like, navigate that question with me, like,
Yeah.
how did you process your own sexuality when it came to all of these different um, positionalities
Yeah.
in religion?
Yeah, I had a really positive experience with religion as a kid, and that I think is a key piece of my story. My parents were not, rule following Catholics. They were not super pious. They were religious. They were engaged. It was very much central to their life, and it was important for them, for
Mm.
all of us to be, I'm the youngest of 10 kids. Does that tell
Wow.
you they're Catholic? Like, and they wanted all of us to be engaged, but for them it wasn't about piety and following the rules. For them, Catholicism meant social justice, engagement, and commitment to social justice. It meant service to people who needed whatever that you could give. It meant discernment, not just following the rules. The most important thing I think I ever took from my parents' religious perspectives and their religious convictions was this idea of the primacy of conscience. I
Mm.
think of it as like a Catholic version of civil disobedience. It's that idea that my conscience is that part of myself that is closest to God. And so when I'm facing an ethical conundrum, whether it's, what do I have for lunch or global politics and how do I vote, it's the conscience is the thing to listen to, even if it
Mhm.
conflicts with what people are telling you around you, even if it conflicts with what your leaders are telling you, even if it conflicts with the law, even if it conflicts with what the Pope is saying. So my mom used to say, "Oh, the Pope, he's just another priest. What does he know?" And so it was a really different perspective on the world and on faith. It wasn't the sense of religion is this set of rules that you have to follow. It was the sense of religion is a structure and vocabulary and tools for you to use,
Mhm.
but you have to figure out how to use it, and you have to figure out how you can use it to serve the world, to make, to pursue justice, to pursue peace. So that was really important for me growing up. When I figured out, it wasn't until I was in middle school that I really even understood what gay meant. I
Mhm.
didn't know anybody. There were people in my family. I didn't know if they were. I didn't know if there was anybody in our world who understood what that meant. I had no vocabulary, and I think a lot of queer people have that, right? If we don't have examples, if we don't have the language, we're just kind of lost for a long time. But around seventh or eighth grade, I figured it out. Like, oh, gay, that's me. I don't know what that means, but when I get to high school, I'm gonna be gay. And then on the first day of high school at my all boys Jesuit high school, 1,500 boys in this school. You can imagine what it smelled like. But first day of school, one of my classmates threw me up against the wall in a stairwell and spit the word faggot in my face, and then just walked off. And that a couple things. One, it was a scar that I'm still treating. It just that was my introduction to high school. This is the world. Uh, it also was like, how did they know? I barely know. How does he know? Um, but it also told me like, oh, this isn't safe. So it was a good Virgo. I was able to compartmentalize it, and I thought, okay, when I get to college, that's when we'll do this. And so when I got to college is when I started kind of coming out and started exploring. And I came out to my sister after my sister Patty after my freshman year of college, and she helped me figure out, okay, who can we tell who's not going to spill the beans to mom and dad, and so she helped me navigate that. And when I finally came out to my parents the summer before my senior year,
Mhm.
I was ready for the conversation. I had 3 years of theology under my belt, and I knew the first question out of my mom's mouth was going to be like, well, what about what the church says? And that is exactly what the first question that came out of my mom's mouth. What about what the church says? And I responded, you taught me about the primacy of conscience. And I know in my body, I know in my conscience that this is how God created me, that this is who I am. And I think it's the rest of the world that it's the church that needs to catch up. And that changed the way that she thought about it. That changed, her sense of what the challenges were, what were the opportunities. So even right up to that point, I still didn't experience that conflict between, my sexual identity and my religious identity. Um, so when I started teaching at a little Catholic girls' school and I was the campus minister, I was the face of the church for the school. My co-campus ministers and we did all the liturgies and the retreats, and we all taught, courses in religious studies. And so I really was the face of the church for my students.
Mhm.
Um, and I took that as an opportunity to move the needle in the church. I thought, isn't this great? Here I am. I am gay as can be, and they've got a gay campus minister, and I can use more inclusive language. I wasn't trying to convert anybody. I wasn't trying to tear down the church. I wanted my students to get the same sense that I got from my parents, that here are the tools to recreate the world, recreate the church, recreate yourself, not conform to these structures. And I was in a community that was receptive to that. It was a progressive and inclusive and a really safe place. My colleagues, my bosses, I had been singing with the Boston Gay Men's Chorus for a few years
Mhm.
before I started teaching, and it was on my resume. They hired me anyway because I think they had several queer, people on staff, and it wasn't an issue. That said, there was just a line that you didn't cross. You didn't talk in front of certain people. You didn't share certain details with, students or families. Other people would talk about their boyfriends or their girlfriends with students. I just knew not to talk about that. I didn't talk about my boyfriend. I didn't talk about, my social life much. Yeah, so it was that implicit like, don't, and this was a way to keep everybody safe. Um, Now that said, 3 weeks into teaching, I was with my boyfriend at the time, and we were on the T in Boston, and we had just had a couple of drinks on our way to a birthday party. We got a little flirty and we started making out on the train. And all of a sudden I look and I see one of my students sitting directly across from us. And I thought, oh, this is the end. Like this is the end. I just started teaching at a Catholic school and I've just been spotted by one of my students. Monday morning comes and I cross paths with this kid. And I said, "How was your weekend?" And she said, "It was all good." And that was her way of saying like, "We're good." Like I'm not telling anybody. It's not. A couple years later, I was having coffee with another former student and catching up, and she mentioned that first student. And I said, "Hey, did she ever tell you a story about me?" And she looked away and said, about the train." I was like,
Uh-huh.
yes. Oh yeah, everybody knows about that. So for a few years, like the whole student body knew that I was gay and knew that this story was floating around, and it never caused a problem for me. So that to me was also a sign of I am in a safe place. This is a safe community. I can keep going. I went to I started working at a different school, a different program, but I was still very much leading a service program at this second
Mhm.
Catholic girls' school. Um, and I went to a conference, and Dan Savage was speaking about the It Gets Better project. It was just a few years after the It Gets Better project had started, and so Dan told this story about how he and Terry, his husband, started this project to send the message to queer kids, it will get better. Because there was a spate of very highly publicized suicides by queer kids.
Yeah.
And this was their way of we have YouTube. We can get into the kid's laptop. We can get into the kid's phone and send the message.
Mm.
It is going to get better. Like, hold on. And so it was a very inspiring talk. Dan is a great speaker. He knew his stuff. And he started responding to questions. And a woman got up and said, "I'm going to read a question from somebody else. They can't ask this question because even standing up and asking a question here would risk her job at this conservative religious school." And everybody in the room was like, "Oh my God, could you be?" Except for those of us who work in religious schools, like, yeah, that sounds familiar. Um, and the question was something like, "I'm queer. I'm here to, keep an eye on my students. What can I do to better serve my queer students? Like, what can I do for that?" And everybody was nodding along, like, "Yeah, that's why we're here. We want to know what can we do better." And Dan kind of stopped and he tilted his head and said, "You're not going to like my answer." He said, "My advice is to get your resume in order. You think your presence there is sending a message of safety and that, you're looking out for them. But what you're really telling them is that it's okay to leave part of yourself at the door on the way into work." And uh, I can't tell you how much that rocked me.
Mhm.
My entire self-understanding as an educator, my entire self-understanding as a Catholic gay man just flipped. It completely destroyed my self-understanding and my mission. And I burst into tears. And my boss was sitting next to me and she said, "We're gonna have to talk about this, aren't we?" I said, "Yes." And that set the path for me. I got my resume in order. It took a little bit of time to figure out what was next, and but it set the path for me to leave Catholic schools, and I worked at an Episcopal school, and that was a big change. It was radical. I didn't realize how much I had been stifling myself over the years of, I was so committed to providing this perspective to my students.
Mm.
I thought I was going to be able to move the needle in the church. Uh, and Dan pointed out, I'm complicit. I was part of the structures that were it by not actively resisting those elements. I was complicit, and I worry about what the message I sent to students over the years. I hope that they saw I know several of my students have since I've stayed in touch and they say, "Oh, we thought it was so cool. We had a gay campus minister." I was like, "Okay, that's good." But I'm so sorry that if I ever gave the impression that it was okay to leave part of myself at the door.
Mm.
So that's yeah, it's a long answer to your question, but that early lesson of from my mom about the primacy of conscience, it wasn't about leaving one part of myself behind. It was always the search of figuring out, okay, how can I integrate these? How can I live in a way that I'm authentically both? Right now, that doesn't mean practicing in the church. I haven't been to church in a long time. We're in a fight. I don't know if the church realizes it, but we're in a big fight, and I'm waiting for them to come around and apologize. But there are glimmers of hope. There are movements within the church to protect queer folks. Queer folks are getting a bit stronger voice, more protection. The theology's not changing, the church teaching isn't changing, but the tone has shifted, and that alone has been a really positive growth in the last decade.
Yeah.
But I'm
Well,
not ready to go
and
back because I'm not ready. I feel integrated and at peace, but I don't want to walk back into that. I don't need to fix it for them. They need to fix it themselves.
yeah. Well, and like Bill, did you ever hear from those you went to high school with? Like, I'm sure they're out of like an all boys school. There had to be other like
Statistically.
queer men, like who you found out later, had come out. Like, was there any like conversations you had post high school about, sexuality or like, that kind of coming out journey?
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia,
And I'm Luke Del Mar.
and we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA plus people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
Welcome to Severed, a podcast week dropping new episodes every Monday. Severed true crime and severed paranormal episodes deep dive into murder, mysteries, and the otherworldly in a concise format. A 7-minute story to frame the case with thoughtful analysis and our usual banter.
We sometimes find the lighter side of darker cases. We offer 3 spin-off shows, Severed Strange Stories, Severed Haunted You, and Severed Serial Killers that highlight the unusual to lighthearted topics from the digital dumpsters of true crime, haunted universities, and the minds of madness like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer.
We are your co-hosts. I'm Harry Chambers.
And I'm Drew Hudson. Listen on all major podcast platforms, including Rogue Media Network and Radio Garden State. Follow us on Instagram at severed_podcast.
There's a bar in Chicago called Sidetrack. Maybe you've been there. If you're a gay man and you've been to Chicago, you've probably been to Sidetrack. And Thanksgiving weekend, there's a night that a lot of the guys from my high school would show up at Sidetrack, and it was every year, a couple more people from our class would show up, and I'm like, oh, he's out now too. Oh, he's out now too. Oh, he's out now too. And so it was this kind of growing core. It just started, once we left college, one by one. I think I might have been one of the first people to be out, but certainly wasn't the last.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think a lot of us shared those experiences. A lot of us had those tales to tell of being just scared shitless on a regular basis. On the other hand, uh, the most meaningful conversations I've had with people have not been other queer classmates, but some of the straight boys. It was actually really interesting when the hearings were going on for Brent Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
and it opened this whole can of worms about the culture of elite independent schools, and in particular that school that and the culture of how teenagers and the sexual culture there, and how dangerous it was, particularly for young women. Um, it sounded very familiar, and it sparked a conversation between me and a couple of other of my classmates from high school And they both were more processing it. They were like, they were suddenly seeing our high school experience in a really different lens. And for them, it wasn't just about, relationships with, with girls in those days, but it was also recognizing the homophobia, the violent heterosexism that was happening on a daily basis. And
Mhm.
it was pretty moving. It was really moving for me to actually hear them recognize things that I recognized a long time ago. And even though, it was 25 years or 30 years before that conversation even started, but at least they're recognizing it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and what was it like when we're at Harvard specifically? I'm sure so many interesting faculty members, so many interesting like classmates of yours. Was there a lot of discussions? Because, I don't really know exactly what happens in a divinity school um, curriculum, but are there a lot of discussions about, sex and sexuality when it comes to religion, or is that not necessarily a focus? Or I mean, I guess it depends if that's like what you're interested in.
You've got a lot of young intellectuals. Everything's going to be talking about sex and sexuality. In divinity school is a peculiar academic hybrid, right? There's a pastoral side, a ministerial side, and an academic side. So I did an MTS, Master of Theological Studies, which is typically it's more of an academic degree, and it's typically a stepping stone into a PhD.
Mm,
And the other half of the school was focusing on Master of Divinity, and those are folks who are moving on toward more pastoral ministries or ordination in different churches, different denominations. Um, so it was an interesting mix of people who were on the pastoral side and people who were on the academic side. I've always felt a little bit right in the middle, right? Um, and there were a lot of queer folks. And actually, there was kind of a joke at Harvard in those days of if you were gay, oh, do you go to the divinity school? Or if you're at the divinity school, oh, so you're gay, right?
mm,
So it was there was an assumption that everybody at the div school was queer.
mm,
And it wasn't that far off. It was a large it was definitely part of the conversation. It was part of the ethos. It was part of
mm.
it was in the atmosphere, right? People liked talking about it. Um, Interestingly though, the harshest reactions I got when I identified as a gay Catholic were from other queer people in divinity school. I remember so profoundly um, my first year of divinity school was when Matthew Shepard was murdered,
Mm.
and uh, there was a group of people who organized not a service, but kind of created a safe space, and so people could come together and just grieve and hear what was going on, and it was
Like a
impacting all of
vigil?
us. Not quite a vigil, but it
Okay.
was really just kind of a hey, we're making this space to come together, show up if you need it, and
Mm.
so. And it was incredibly powerful to hear people. I was about this. I think I'm the same age as Matthew Shepard, and it was really, really startling to see that I could be. I was very much empathizing with what he was going through. Everybody was, um, and I remember that one feeling so unified with these other folks who were in the same space. We're all engaged in this intellectual and pastoral work, and we're bringing our whole selves to it. So that was really reassuring. On the other hand, afterwards, I was chatting with somebody, and he said, "How can you still be Catholic?" And I was like, "This is not the time.
Mm.
This is not the place. I'm real raw." Um, but it was a question I got frequently from other queer people. It wasn't. I didn't get a lot of negative messaging from Catholic people like, you shouldn't be gay. I was getting the negative messaging from the queer people saying like, how are you still Catholic? It
Mm.
was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing for people to say, oh, I'm not just lapsed Catholic. What were the other ones? Recovering Catholic. That was one that was popular in those days.
Mm.
Um, and I totally understand when people are traumatized, there are reasons that people left the church. There are reasons people are angry about the church because they were very directly traumatized by that. Um, but they couldn't see that there was another way to experience it. They were invalidating my experience And I thought, why are queer people invalidating other queer people's experiences? That
Mm.
was really rattling for me. That was really rattling for me. So it was, yeah, being in Harvard in those days was, it was definitely part of the conversation. Everybody was talking about it. It felt very safe in a lot of ways as a queer person, but it was harder to navigate. People had much harsher, much more rigid ideas of boundaries that people needed to stay behind.
Yeah. Well, so like, are you close a lot, Bill, to, I know there's much more. Actually, it's interesting you mention the Episcopal Church because there's a church near me that I've been meaning to go to services that's Episcopal because I know if you were raised Catholic, it's like the most, well, they say it's the most similar in, I think, the ritual practices.
Yeah.
But I know like what I really I'll explain why I'm basically lapsed Catholic is I don't like that there's no female leaders in priestly roles. I
Hmm.
don't like that they put a lot of political ideology into, specifically when it comes to a woman's right to choose, which
Hmm.
is a frustration I have.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of like trying to connect who you vote for and the belief practices.
Hmm.
Like the Vatican
Hmm.
being in so involved when it comes to certain ideology. But, I'm curious like if you know many priests or, pastors who are open. Like I know there are Catholic priests who are gay. Like
Hmm.
it's not an anomaly, but it's
Yeah.
like
It
now
shouldn't surprise anyone. Yeah.
can they actually be in a relationship? That's the thing. Like can they be
Mm.
non-celibate or do they have
Yeah.
to hide that part of themselves?
That's an interesting thing about the priestly vow of celibacy. Celibacy isn't about denying your sexuality. It's about channeling your sexual energy into a different life. Um, I personally think if you feel drawn to live in community, like in a monastic community, that's where celibacy really evolved as part of life as a priest or life as a brother or life as a sister in those monastic communities. And it was a different way of channeling your natural biological sexual energy into communal life.
Mm,
So celibacy was a way to maintain, the integrity of that community. Priests were, parish priests were married until I think the 10th century, 10th or 11th century.
mm,
And even today, it if somebody converts, if a priest converts from the Anglican Church, for example, or the Episcopal Church to Catholicism, and they're married, they bring their marriage with them. They bring their wife with them, and it's a very unusual thing to go to a Catholic parish and be like, well, there's father and his wife. Huh, that's new. Huh.
mm.
But it's this weird little loophole, and it's like, well, if they can get married, why can't the others? So celibacy isn't about denying sexuality. Celibacy is about where you're channeling it. Then I think the Catholic Church is really confused about like how do we do this? By making all priests celibate in the 10th and 11th centuries, that was a way to consolidate power and property. Priests and their families were inheriting like the rectory, and the house became a family house, and they wanted that property back, and so they kicked, the families out. So priests had to be on their own. It was a political move. It was an economic move. It wasn't rooted in anything theological. They found the theological justification for it
It all
later.
comes back to money.
It all comes back to
In
money.
everything,
Capitalism
in
strikes again,
everything.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms and there have always been gay priests, and some of them are out and some of them are not. But if they've taken the vow of celibacy, I hope it's not to run away from a gay identity. I hope it's because they see, oh, this is how I want to live my life, my spiritual life.
Yeah.
I think of people like I don't know if he's publicly identified as gay, but James Martin, who's an editor at American Magazine, he's an author and speaker, and he's a Jesuit priest, and
Mm,
he's wonderful. And his his focus right now is outreach between the Catholic Church and LGBTQ folks.
Mm.
And he's made a lot of waves and he's gotten a lot of momentum. Um, I assume he's gay, but he's never publicly identified as it.
Yeah.
Um, on the other hand, there are organizations like New Ways Ministries, which was founded by Sister Janine Gramick and Bishop Gumbleton, Tom Gumbleton, I think in the late 70s or early 80s. And New Ways was created to be a safe place for queer folks in the church to find the support, find the spiritual community that they needed, without shaming them, without rejecting their sexual identities. And Janine Gramick was censured and by the Vatican and forced out of her original religious community.
Oh,
But
wow.
she still kept going, right? And Tom Gubbleton also, I think he was relieved or excommunicated of his ministries, and but also stuck with it, as a way to. It's not necessarily that those two people were queer, but they were making the space for, despite the church's interference, despite people's discomfort with it, they wanted to make those safe spaces because that to them was core to what it meant to be church, what it meant to be the Catholic community.
Well, and that's really the ethos of your book, Bill, is like you process in this really auto theory kind of way, which I love, of like making sense out of philosophical ideas
Hmm.
by like tying it into your personal experience, and like you create this type of like lexicon of criticism. Is It's really about, you bring this message forth of what works for the individual person to connect to, whether it's a higher power, whether it's how nature inspires them, how art inspires them. Like, just there's this, and I'm sure I'm sure you know it from your studies, but in Judaism, there's the idea of tikkun olam, which is like repairing the world. And I feel like it does seem that you have so much um, advice to give, or just how, finding your own path, that it's ever evolving. Like, if you're an openly gay Episcopal, it's a pastor, right? Or minister. I forget.
Priest, pastor.
Okay, okay.
My
So
job, I was a
like,
campus minister, but yeah.
okay. So like, but if you're, you know, an Episcopalian who's out, like, it shouldn't be seen as less than if you were a Catholic priest. Like, that we shouldn't really create these hierarchies
Yeah.
of like, you know, what religion you celebrate or practice, or you're a part of a certain community. And I think sometimes
Mm.
that's the issue, is like our society right now, there's been such a hierarchy of like, oh no, my religion is the right religion. Or, if you're not Christian, then you haven't found the true God. And it's
Yeah.
like all of these like divisive
Yeah.
fracturings that happen. And I'm kind of curious, like, you know, with the voice that you bring forward in your book, like, why is it so important for you, Bill, like in your book, in your daily life, to like be so expressive and articulate and conscious of your path and your journey?
Mm.
The spring season is here, which means there's a new issue of the Gay and Lesbian Review called Victorian Times, all about my favorite period of literature, the 19th century. And you'll see a rugged Walt Whitman on the cover and the dandy Oscar Wilde. Well, guess what? My first article is now published in the Gay and Lesbian Review, called Once Upon a Time in Camden. It's the intro to my book, which looks into their queer literary relationship, but also Whitman and Wilde's homoerotic poetics, and specifically what Whitman does with male same-sex desire before the category of homosexuality even existed. Like, how did he even express this in his poetry? Well, you'll have to read my book to find out. book coming soon. If you know of a publisher, let me know. I'm shopping around right now. But this Victorian issue is so special with the Gay and Lesbian Review. There's articles on Dr. Jekyll and Victor Frankenstein. I'm about to see The Bride, which I can't wait to see. And right, Guillermo del Toro's new Frankenstein is all the rage. There's an article on Monte Cristo's Women in Love, Tchaikovsky's Men. I love Tchaikovsky's ballet. I'm particularly an admirer of The Sleeping Beauty. One on Captain Cobb. There's film and TV shows reviewed like Heated Rivalry, Boots, Kiss of the Spider Woman, which, if you don't know, I had an episode with Jeremy Fox from the Gay and Lesbian Review, the managing editor, and Colin Carmen and Joseph Federico, and we talked all about Heated Rivalry. You have to listen to it. And Kiss of the Spider Woman, I keep recommending to everyone. It is an astounding film. Boots, I actually had the creator Greg Cope White on the podcast too. You'll have to listen to his interview. Also, if you haven't heard our episode on the kink issue of the magazine, it's really, really interesting. And the ethnography one. And yes, there will be an episode soon about the Victorian issue. So get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review. The digital subscription is really easy to get, glreview.org. The print subscription also, head on over to the website, click subscribe, use the promo code ITBR choice. You get a free issue of the magazine. Choose the Victorian issue, will you? So head to their Instagram, their TikTok. I love the Gay and Lesbian Review. I get so many book recommendations, TV show, film recommendations. One of the films that I can't wait to watch is in this issue. I want to say it's pronounced Pillion or Pillion. I think I made it French there, with Alexander Skarsgård. So enjoy your reading, everyone. And if you're reading the Gay and Lesbian Review, please reach out to me. I want to let them know, that you all listening to this podcast are reading their magazine. Now that the spring semester is here, I am so excited to let you all know about a publisher, an independent publisher that's celebrating 40 years of great books called Broadview Press. I love Broadview Press. I have so many of their editions of classic literature like Wuthering Heights, which is coming out soon, and it's our book club choice. And they have so many academic books for instructors and for students and the general public. So I've had so many exciting guests on, from guests talking about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, guests talking about vampire literature, horror literature. I'm looking at you, Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock, whose book actually just came out called Horror Theory. Look it up. And I cannot wait because I have two exciting guests coming on soon. And I've recorded their episodes, so I know that it's going to be such an interesting conversation. The first is Rachel Tucholsky, who wrote a book called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college. I've used excerpts of it for my Writing 2 course at Montclair. It has gone over so well. I just love what Rachel does, and we get into this in our episode about this metaphor about writing on fire, like how that's a great way to think about free-flowing, brainstorming, creative ideas, and getting into that flow state, which, as Rachel explains, happens not just in writing, but in many other avenues. And then the other guest that I have on is David Starkey, who wrote a book called Academic Writing Now, A Brief Guide for Busy Students. It is designed to cover the basics of a college writing course in a concise, student-friendly format. Each chapter concentrates on a crucial element of composing an academic essay and is capable of being read in a single sitting, which, for a generation, myself included, I think all of us now, just consumed by digital media or just this attention-grabbing technology, reading in a single sitting is definitely a plus. So head to Broadview Press, use the promo code Ivory Tower, and you'll get 20% off every single book in their collection. There's also a really cool digital library collection they have. So if you're a librarian, take a look at that. Message me. If you're a librarian, I'd be happy to show you what that new collection looks like. And I hope you all enjoy your reading.
I've always been drawn to reflective practices. And for me, it's a way of making meaning. And reflection doesn't mean, sitting and feeling warm and fuzzy and having ideas.
Hmm.
But I think of reflection more in a very John Deweyan sense of it's a critical form of, exploration. It is a critical process. It's best done when it's in community or in interaction with others, whether they're right in front of you or whether it's someone from 1700 years ago. But it's dialogue is one of the richest ways to reflect because it's not just about what I think, it's about, here's what I'm experiencing. I want to bounce it off of you, and we're going to iterate together and we're going to create something, out of that interaction. Um, so reflection has always been really valuable for me to understand myself, to understand how to get through the world. Um, when when I was going through my own sort of recreation, my own, I burned out. I had been teaching for a long time, and then I experienced significant grief. My family went into kind of a grief spiral for several years. Both my parents got ill and were declining. My mom died. My sister died very suddenly a year later. My
I'm
dad
sorry.
after a few months after she died. And so the whole family was just reeling, right? We were totally rocked by this, and it really made me vulnerable to burnout. And I did. I totally burned out. I totally fell apart. Um, and so I took a year off to make space and to heal and to figure out, okay, what am I going to do next? I didn't just start working on my resume. I started reflecting. I started looking back, like I wanted to understand how I landed here. How did I get here to this place? I thought I was so resilient. I thought I was so strong in so many ways. How did I fall apart? I wanted to understand that. And then I started, I started writing, I started thinking just to kind of process that. And then 2020 happened and everybody fell apart. The whole world fell apart. And in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of, the social tribalism and the strife and the reckoning, after George Floyd's murder that we all faced and the economic, roller coaster and the political roller coaster that we've been on since then. So I didn't want to understand just how I landed here, but I wanted to understand how we all landed here. And and when I looked around, I saw people really scrambling. Like they didn't have the tools that I had to step back and make sense of things. I was really lucky. I recognized that I was really lucky that I had this really integrated into myself. I taught it for a long time. I lived it for a long time, these different ways of reflection and making sense of the world. And that to me was a path not just to understand myself, but also finding some peace and finding some direction. Um, that kind of reflection makes me more empathetic to other people. I want to understand other people's experiences, even if they are so radically different, even if they hate me. I want to understand how did you land in that place that you see me like this? It doesn't help to just react, and push back. I want to. I that wasn't going to get us anywhere new. So when I started exploring like how do we all land here, everybody needs those tools. And so I started writing the book really as the book emerged as a gift, I guess, or an invitation to other people to, if you don't have these tools, if you're not used to reflecting, if that's not a comfortable thing for you, I wanted to show it's not that hard. It's really worth it to take the time to look back. What are the experiences that shaped you and delivered you to this moment? And now you have a choice. You can hold on to that or you can let it go. Early in the pandemic, Arundhati Roy, who's one of my favorite authors, and she wrote this article called "The Pandemic is a Portal," and it was April 2020, so it was right as it was starting. But she saw the pandemic and what was going to happen. She knew what was going to happen, and she looked at in history, pandemics were opportunities, not just crises, that the world recreated itself after a pandemic. So now that we know this, what are we going to do? What's the world that we're going to recreate together? And the line that was like my mantra during 2020 was, there is nothing could be worse than a return to normality. You
Mm.
know, everyone was like, we need to get back to normal. What's the new normal? And she was saying that's the wrong motivation. Like, the worst thing we can do is return to normal. Instead, here we are. We're at this portal, and we can either drag all of our shit with us, or we can let go what we need to let go and carry what we want to carry forward and
Absolutely.
into creating into through that portal to create something new. I feel like for me, that's what this book was doing.
Mm.
This was my way of discerning, what do I need to let go of? What do I need to make peace with? What do I need to get angry about? What do I need to get angrier about? And what do I really want to do moving forward? It's not just about like, oh, what's my next career going to be? It's who am I going to be in the next 50 years of my life? And that's what the book helped me to do. And I hope that, I hope other people read it, and not just a way to say, oh, isn't his life interesting? Because my life's not interesting enough for a memoir, but it's a way of saying like, hey, oh, I should look back at my own experiences too. And I
Yes.
want to figure out, who do I want to be? I don't need to just keep doing this over and over again. How do I want to be different? And
Well,
how can I get there?
you teach us a reflective practice, and that's what I love about like the genre that you're entering into, which is like both memoir meets um like the nonfiction and educational kind of pedagogy, but it's up to the reader, like for us to really understand like what your process is and like
Mm,
see if anything speaks to us about our own journey. And I
mm,
think you do such a nice job carrying us into, your psyche and your thought processes. Like even when you bring up interesting pop culture references, which like,
mm.
you know, how did you how did you know, Bill, like you needed to include certain films and TV shows to speak to your own life? Are you like a big film buff?
I love movies. I love entertainment. I love television. I love being entertained. I love books, but I'm a real slow reader. My husband is a voracious reader, and he reads so fast. And he can read probably three books in the time that I'm getting through half of one. But audiobooks have changed my life, and that's great. But I love stories, and I love different ways of telling stories. I love, you know, but there are those things that, especially when I was a young kid, especially when I was in high school or college, and I was just trying to figure stuff out, I didn't have language for myself to understand who I was and my desires and what was available. But I'd get these little glimpses, in movies or on TV or in music. I don't know why, but the first time I saw Madonna on
Mm.
television, it was the Open Your Heart video, and it was on a after school music video hour on a local television station. And I remember seeing her and just knowing that that's my girl. I don't know why. I just knew that she was my girl, and I started paying attention to her in my little middle school brain. And she somehow was, both owning the identity that she was given and pushing forward and creating something new. For some reason, even as a little kid, I just knew that she was my girl. So this was or like the Golden Girls. My mom and I used to watch the Golden Girls.
Mm.
I can remember sitting on the floor in my mom's bedroom playing Scrabble and watching TV, and I can remember her laughing at some things that, that I didn't understand. But I also loved those women, and they were an example of a chosen family for me. And my mom loved them, and she loved it. They reminded me of my mom and her friends. They were all about the same age.
Mm.
And it was formative for me, not just in the sense of like, isn't that great entertainment? It was showing me a different way to be a family. Like, I didn't have to imagine living with a wife and 2.2 children and a dog and a cat. I could imagine creating a family with a group of friends and having a joyful and meaningful, life together with them. So little things like that stuck with me because they gave me language, they gave me a vision that the rest of the world didn't give me. When it came to writing the book, it actually, the third part of the book I call Pride, and it celebrates a lot of these things, TV shows, movies, people, celebrities, even places that that gave me language, that gave me an experience to understand myself and shape my queer identity. Um, that whole part of the book started in Pride 2019 and 2020. In 2019, it was the 50th anniversary
Yeah.
of the Stonewall Rebellion, and the year later, in 2020, it was the 50th anniversary of the first march. And it was a good marker for all of us to look back and look how far we've come and celebrate Stonewall. And people were but here comes capitalism again, right? I walked into the mall and it was like a unicorn threw up. It was just
Mm.
rainbows everywhere. And every store, every brand, every corporation was trying to pride brand, a rainbow brand themselves to show that they were queer friendly and come spend money with us. And isn't this great? That was not joyful for me. And it actually upset me quite a bit. Like, oh my God, have we lost pride? It's totally been co-opted by corporations and marketing. And so I wanted to do something for myself. Like, well, what is pride for me? And I started thinking about here are the people, here are the movies, here are the TV shows that taught me what it means to be proud of myself. So I set a little bit of, during Pride Month, I started the practice of setting a little bit of time to think about something that shaped me, that helped me, that gave me some tools to shape myself.
Mm.
Um, and that was my daily exercise and making pride very personal for me. And so I hope that that third part of the book also, I hope it helps people make pride personal for them too. It's not just about going to the parties and the parades. It's certainly certainly not about corporate sponsorships that we learned this year. All those rainbow branded corporations suddenly have pulled out with other threats. And I like that because it shows us who our friends are. Um, but it also gives us the chance to recreate pride. And I think it's worth diving in and making it more personal. What are the what are the things to celebrate? The list could go on
Yeah.
much longer. I have a much longer list of things than what landed in the book. Um, but I think it's worth coming back and celebrating those people and those places and those experiences and that art that continues to inspire us and shape us.
No, thank you, Bill. And well, so I have to ask, what is the reference or the inspiration behind your title, Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass?
It's all about my mom. It's all about my mom.
Oh, okay.
So my mom had a way with words, and when people would hear that she had 10 children, and they'd be floored. You have 10 children. And she was not impressed by that, by herself, by having birthed 10 children. So she would try to change to a different conversation. And her way to do that was, quippy. So people would, you have 10 children. And she's like, well, they were from my husband's first marriage. And that would confuse people because she was her husband's first marriage. But so she didn't lie, but it was a way to shift topics. But when they heard that she had seven boys, you have seven sons. And she'd say, well, God gave me seven sons for a reason. Six to carry the casket and one to say the mass. Now, it reveals a couple of things about my mom and me. Uh, it's a little insight into her wit, into her humor, but also her perspective. I think, she made meaning out. She had seven boys. That's interesting. And she applied it to her very last moment on the planet. That she saw a role for us.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of her Irish Catholic humor as well, creeping out. Um, I often say that she prepared us for her death from the moment we were born. Um, if you ever walked around our house, I'll show you something. If you ever gave her a gift, like out of nowhere, a Sharpie would come out and she'd write your name on the bottom of it. And we all understood what it meant. But if anybody asked, she'd say, well, when I'm dead, I don't want these kids fighting over stuff. And so this was her way of, sorting things out. So yeah, this is a little vase that I gave my mom. I don't know when, but yeah, and there's my name on the bottom to
Oh,
make sure that uh, when
that
they
you
die,
got it
we wouldn't
when
be
she
fighting over these
passed.
little ceramic
Wow.
vases. Um,
That's a
so
very organized person,
oh,
too.
you'd have to be to raise that many kids. But so the other piece of it, the title is pointing to me, and it was like one of the first identities handed to me. You know, I was the one to say the mass.
Mm.
Um, the first, by the time I was conscious, it was very clear that the first six were not headed to seminary. And then um, when I was really involved in religion, and as a kid, when I was into my religion classes and involved in retreats and liturgies, and when I was a religious studies major, and then when I was going to divinity school, I think my mom saw like a prophecy coming to fruition that, oh, she's gonna get that priest. He's gonna be able to say my funeral. Uh, so she didn't get a priest in me, but I'm the closest that she got.
Wow.
So I
Well,
picked that as the title. It's the title of an essay about my mom and particularly my relationship with my mom.
yeah.
And so it was a way to highlight that, but also to say this was one of my first identities, and here's what I did with it. Keep reading to find out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and, my like last question, I mean, you've touched upon it, but I feel like why is it so important, do you think, Bill, like specifically for being so out proud, like you've talked about, you have the section in your book about, what pride means to you, like how we can all, be prideful and like not just with our sexuality, but in all different kind of um areas of our life. Like, how has it been, like, now having reflected, having written this book and being open about being so religious and also being so prideful that, like, these two aspects of yourself can exist and, like, not necessarily hearing that narrative or even seeing it reflected in a lot of queer film and
Mm.
queer literature, like in our, pop culture. Like, how do you know, why is it so important, do you think, to embrace that, be open about it, and like you've said, you even have conversations with those who can't believe that, there could be gay Catholics. So,
Mhm.
what did you even learn from this journey of writing this book about yourself?
Oh, I learned, well, I the process of writing and actually the process of editing and when I worked with my editor and the process of publishing, I was able to step back and see myself really differently. And
Mm,
once I put it on the page and we were revising and putting it all together, and then I suddenly saw myself really, really differently, and it felt really empowering. It felt really empowering in the sense that I finally understood myself. I understood how I got here and where I wanted to go, and I owned it. And I
mm,
could own it with delight, and I could own it with courage and with strength.
mm,
Um, I think we get the message a lot of times of you've got a tribe. You were born into a tribe, and you need to stick with the tribe, or you jump to another tribe. Right now we're so divided by that tribalism. Whether it's on religious grounds or sexual grounds or whatever other kind of political category, we're so divided, and people on the far extremes want us to be in camps, want us to be in you pick this or that. I don't think life is meant to be that divided and that sequestered. I think we're all a mosaic of identities. Each of us is made up of different relationships and experiences and values.
mm,
Each of us has been shaped by different places and different times. We all come to the world with different questions, and we all move through the world looking for we need different answers. I don't think it's useful to retreat into camps. Like instead, why don't we why don't we do the work to get comfortable with nuance? Why don't we get comfortable with difference? Yeah, it's not I don't want to live in a world where everybody's the same.
mm.
And I certainly don't want to give up ownership of things that have been really meaningful to me and that I've contributed to. I don't think it's right to ask me to stop being religious or to give up my faith. I wouldn't ask that of somebody else. Instead, I would challenge them to say, well, explain to me why your faith is leading you to hate me or to do this. Help me understand that, and then I can understand what our common ground is, and we can build from there. Um, but I'm done with the power struggles. I'm done with any pursuit of perfection or trying to be something that somebody else wants me to be. I think the world is going to find peace when we recognize that.
Yeah. And when you let go of a type of egotism, of like, yeah, your viewpoint has to always be the one reflected back. And
Yeah.
like,
There's
and
a
you're,
great case
yeah.
study in this with with the hatred and the rejection of trans identity, hatred of
Mm,
trans folks and the rejection of trans identity, even just as an idea by, religious folks.
mm,
I don't get that. Like I think there are a lot of people with religious conviction saying, here's the religious vision for the world, and that's what I'm going to project onto everybody. And if you don't fit into that, then you're not human. Then you're not worthy of whatever this religion is offering.
mm,
Why did we start responding like that instead of saying like, wow, doesn't this reveal something else about creation? Doesn't
mm,
your experience tell me, oh, I don't understand what's going on in the world? For religious folks, I don't understand the mind of God. Like,
mm,
how dare you, as a human person who claims faith in God, how dare you impose limits on God? And what's the point of believing in God? The whole concept of God is, well, what was Anselm's definition? St. Anselm's definition was God is that beyond which nothing further can be thought.
mm.
If we think we understand the mind of God, then we've got another thing coming to us. And I think we proceed thinking that the universe is going to conform to what we know and understand. But every day we have experiences like, oh, no, this is not my world. This is my journey, but it's not my world alone.
Mm. Well, Bill, this has been such a pleasure. I feel like, I could just talk to you forever about these ideas and, definitely, hopefully, I'll have you back on. We'll figure out like something that connects us back together with these concepts. But I want everyone out there to know how they can get your book. So where can everyone, get Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass?
You can find it anywhere you find books. I have been encouraging folks to go to their local independent bookstore to ask for the book and order it.
Mm.
But if that's not an option for you, it's also on all of the online platforms, Allstora, Barnes Noble, Amazon, anywhere you buy books.
And how
Information
can,
about my book is all on
yeah.
my website, billhulseman.com. And most of the website is about my work as a virtual designer and wedding officiant, but the I've got a couple of pages dedicated to Six to Carry the Casket, and all information about that and information about great conversations like I'm having with you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
are all on the website.
And also it has your social media too on the website.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Bill Hulseman Rituals. I think on Blue Sky, I'm also Bill Hulseman on Blue Sky. And yeah, you can find me everywhere. And if people are reading it, or if people are even just thinking about these topics, I love talking about this stuff. I love thinking about it, and I've done enough thinking about it for myself. But I really eager to hear other people and what they're making sense of their own, how they're making sense of their own lives, and what they're understanding, as we move through the world.
Yeah. Well, even like in our conversation, you know, I want to thank you because you've helped me think about, um, not divorcing the ideas of being, you know, religious and openly gay like that. It's not like these parts can't come together,
Mhm.
and like that I'm still on an evolving journey and that's okay. Like it doesn't have to all be solved in one day.
No.
Like you figuring out your religious identity. But also, really quick, what is a ritual designer?
Well, my flippant response is somebody who designed rituals. But no, most of my work is in weddings. And so I work with couples who don't have a tradition to draw on, whether
Mm.
because they just didn't grow up in a religious or cultural tradition that has meaningful wedding practices, or because they're excluded from those traditions, or because they want to do something interfaith or intercultural, and they don't want it
Mm.
just to be a cafeteria slop of, things thrown together, or they want to do something non-patriarchal, or something totally original and unique. So I work with couples to design that ceremony together. So I don't just work on weddings, but I love to work on all kinds of rituals. I have a particular tools, the toolkit. I've got a particular set of skills around ritual design that not many people have a lot of practice with.
Mm.
So there's a small number of us who sit in this niche of ritual design. And but yeah, it's all about identifying, like, what is the moment that you want to create, and what are the values that you want to communicate, how are the interactions that you want to shape, and delivering that experience. So it's
Oh,
it's
thank you,
it's
Bill.
fun
Oh,
work.
no, no.
Yeah.
I know. Well, now you're making me think, do I need to get a ritual designer for my wedding?
Hey, let's talk. I'm totally
I
serious.
know.
Like, I
All
I
the
think
talk. I
that
mean, I'm in Jersey, but
yeah.
still, I feel like,
Well, I we can talk about ritual design. I also coach officiants. One of the
oh,
things that, a lot of people invite their family or friends to be an
yes.
officiant, which is so wonderful, but they don't always know what they're doing. So you end up downloading a ceremony off the internet, and, like,
And it might not
I really
speak
don't.
to
Yeah.
us. It just speaks generically. Okay, well, we'll
Yeah.
take this off air, Bill,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll email you. We might have to do a little training of an officiant. But
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bill. This was such a pleasure, and I'm so happy that everyone out there gets to hear, you know, a topic that doesn't always come up, but I think is so important is, you know, um, drawing upon what spirituality, means to each of us. Like we all have practices, even if we don't verbalize them, or
Hmm.
even if we don't analyze them, I should say. So yeah, thank you so much, Bill, and I can't wait for more people to get their hands on your book. It's so well done. It's just such a great writing style. I love it.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you
yeah,
so
yeah.
much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, bye, Bill.
Bye bye.